Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the launch of Ireland's Project Economy 2022. This research was first carried out last year, and it's the first of its kind in Ireland. The Project Economy broadly refers to the type of work carried out by independent, self-employed professionals. You might refer to yourself as a contractor, a freelancer, a consultant, or something similar. But the common thread throughout is you are highly educated, typically to degree level or above. You're in the service industry, by which I mean you're generating your income through your professional skill or knowledge, and you're working on a contract for service basis for as long as your client needs you. That is to say, until the project is complete. The work of independent professionals is distinctly different from the picture painted by commentators on the gig economy. The gig economy is a phrase which tends to conjure up images of cyclists with food delivery boxes strapped to their back and other low-paid or unskilled workers. But the type of work we're talking about in Ireland's project economy is right at the other end of the scale. It's high skilled. In fact, 85% of all survey respondents were operating on longer term contracts, which was 15% working on a shorter term task or gig. However, based on their daily rates, their education and their skills, we're still talking about high skilled and high paid workers. There is a need by government to better understand what a healthy, flexible workforce looks like and to take into account the very real differences between high-skilled project workers and those businesses or sectors who seek to possibly exploit lower-paid or unskilled workers. As one survey respondent put it, this is a complex market and requires subtlety, not crude brushstrokes. We're shortly going to hear from the research team, but just a few highlights to frame the 2022 results. The daily rates you get paid are up year on year, and we're going to hear a little bit more about this. The happiness of contractors and freelancers in their work and their confidence in both their sector and the Irish economy in general is far more positive in 2022 than it was in 2021. And most of those surveyed voluntarily choose to work this way, which brings into question the comparison with the gig economy once again. There's no evidence of age discrimination. And we're going to hear some interesting facts on how earnings change across different age groups. And there's positive news around the gender pay gap when compared to the employed workforce. However, women are still underrepresented as a whole, making up just 24% of independent professionals. This is something we see mirrored in our own figures in Contracting Plus, and for probably the last 5 years, there has been no significant change here. However, one wonders, will this year start to bring a change with more hybrid opportunities available? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our research team, and I'll ask Sophie to bring them up on screen as I do the introductions. First, we're going to hear from Professor Andrew Burke. Andrew is the Dean and Chair of Business Studies at Trinity Business School. Previously, he held the Bettany Chair of Entrepreneurship at Cranfield School of Management, where he was the founder and director of the Bettany Centre for Entrepreneurship. He has held the position of chairperson for the Centre of Research on Self-Employed in the UK. And he is Ireland's, if not Europe's, I would say, foremost expert on the work of high-skilled, solo, self-employed individuals. And his research has been presented at the EU Commission, World Trade Organization, the House of Commons, and also, throughout the media in Ireland and the UK. Andrew is going to be joined by Na Fu, who is Associate Professor of Human Resource Management at Trinity Business School. Na's research focuses on the strategic human resource area and digital transformation, where she has published extensively in high-impact international journals. She's also the recipient of multi-awards in research and teaching and has led several research projects around people management and its relevance to organizational growth and innovation. Folks, if you do have questions, please type them in the Q&A box and we'll answer all of these in about 20 minutes time. But for now, Andrew and Na, it's over to you. I'm looking forward to hearing your analysis of the findings, and I'm sure everyone else is too.
Well, thanks, Jimmy, and thank you, Contracting Plus, for supporting this research. I think so we at universities do need support for the research we do. It's cost associated with that, so we very much appreciate your support in this research. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody in the audience because a lot of you have taken part in this survey, and frankly, we wouldn't have anything to say today if it wasn't for you. You've been very generous with your time and telling us about your work and about what you do and what your experience is in freelancing, and that's really been fantastic. So we hope you find this report useful and get an insight into others working in your sector, maybe some benchmarking and so on. And we also hope that it is useful for companies in terms of getting an insight into the value added that the project economy and project work brings to organizations. Not all organizations use this approach, and it's something that's certainly spreading more and more. So hopefully companies will get an insight, and indeed policymakers too. We hope that policymakers will pay attention to these results. And I think that is particularly important because when you look at research in universities, I mean, there's been, particularly in business schools and economics departments, there's lots and lots of research on unemployment, on impact of businesses with employees, etc. And then the research on self-employment tends to sort of be polarized into two ends. One side is the entrepreneurship research, which is all about people starting businesses and growing and hiring people and so on. And then on the other side of it is the kind of the gig economy, low-skilled, solo self-employed area, which has had a lot of research, particularly in relation to low pay and precariat work and so on. And the part that's been missed is the part that we're focused on in this study, which is the project economy, where we're talking about high-skilled solo self-employed, high-skilled independent contractors, freelancers, who predominantly work on a project basis with companies. So typically in terms of introducing new technology, developing new innovation, business development, growing the business, and so on. So it's a very, very important sector. It's a fairly new area of research for universities. We're catching up, I suppose, with things that have been taking place in industry for many years, but policy is even further behind. And I think that's an important area that policymakers need to recognize this distinct market. So first of all, I just want to give you a little oversight of the sample. So it's a predominantly male sector. So roughly 3/4 of the sample, both this year and indeed last year, are males. So there's still some distance to go, I think, in terms of more female participation in this market. As Jimmy mentioned, it's a very highly educated market. 85% of participants have a university degree, and 95% have some level of third-level education. So this is really a distinguishing factor in relation to this particular market segment. And also what's a bit different too is the age group. This isn't a market where or a career path where you leave college or at a young age go into freelancing. For the most part, that's a minority. Not saying that people don't do that. Yes, there's some very successful people at a young age who've broken into this market. But for the most part, this is an industry where experience matters. Experience in terms of building up skills and knowledge in terms of working with companies and so on. Experience in terms of building your own social network, which is helpful in terms of getting work, and indeed, obviously, the education that goes with that as well. So we see here in the sample that, that nearly 25%, over 22% of the sample are 60 and over. So it's an area where normally in the employed sector, you find people beginning to exit the workforce. Here, it's still very vibrant. Most of the work is in the private sector. So 77% is in the private sector. Around about 17% is in the public sector, and a small proportion is in the charitable and not-for-profit sector. In terms of the industries, pharma and medical device and life sciences is the largest. Then you've finance, IT, technology, engineering, but there's also a very big cohort, roughly a third, of doing professional services, things like management consultancy, and so on. So that's a very big part of this activity too. So when we look then at the pay and the length of contract, what's happened really from last year to this year is last year the average length of contracts were 14 months, and that's increased by 14%. So it's gone up from 14 to 16 months. So what we're really observing this year compared to last year is an increased buoyancy in this market, is that people are getting longer contracts. And we're also observing an increase in the pay as well, in the day rates. So the average day rates that high-skilled independent contractors are securing have increased by 13%. So last year it was just over 500 euros, 501, and this year the average day rate is 565. Now, if you look at the bar chart just to the right of the screen there, what you also see, going back to my point about age and experience, is that the day rates that independent contractors are able to secure in the market is positively related to age and experience. So the lowest day rates are charged by independent contractors below the age of 29, that's 384, and they are increasing linearly right up to, or monotonically to be precise, up to the highest group, which is the over 60s. So the over 60s are the group that are able to secure the highest day rates. And also we see it's not just about the money. We see a similar pattern to last year, is that the freelancers, the independent contractors get a lot of non-financial benefit in this. So the satisfaction levels in terms of enjoying the work itself, 85% really find that a positive thing. The flexibility of hours, another 85%, location of job, and then the work-life balance, nearly 3/4 get a benefit from that. So these are very high proportions compared to similar questions related to employees. And in terms of the outlook for the sector and indeed for the Irish economy, there's been an increase in confidence from last year. So this year, 73% of independent contractors expect that the sector, the project economy, will perform better over the next 3 to 5 years. So the sector will expand. So that means that the confidence index has gone up from 30 points to 37 points. And if we compare that to the UK, to the same sample in the UK, we see a very different picture. The UK is quite pessimistic at the moment. Their scores are minus 2.6%. So the UK high-skilled freelancers are actually expecting their sector to contract. So quite a different outlook compared to the UK. And likewise, a similar pattern in relation to outlook on the Irish economy over the next 12 months. There's been a very big increase. Last year was just marginally, people were expecting it to increase over the next 12 months, but a confidence index score of +7. That's moved up to +38 now. And if we compare that to the UK, completely different picture in the UK. They're expecting the UK economy to do worse in 22 than 21 in this particular sector. So I'll hand over to Nafu now.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for taking your lunch hour time to be here. Great to continually after Andrew to share further details about this project. So the first slide you see from me is about expectations on workspace actually. So in 2021, due to the COVID, a lot of people, 60% working from home. And because of we are easing restrictions, now it's very free now. So you can see in 2022, there is expectation to decrease working from home. And the other change you notice is increase of hybrid working, which is a mix of working at home and in client's office. And I think that there's all the rest stay very similar, but I think hopefully this is correspond what your expectation, what you're doing once we are already entering the second quarter. The next slides, I actually introduce the well-being. So Andrew, if you pass the next slide, please. Yep. Thank you. Great. Very, very positive, great news. And in this contracting sector, where is very, very high level of well-being. On the left-hand chart, you can see, for well-being, we have loneliness and burnout. The 60% actually not feel isolation, and 60% didn't feel burnout. So this is a great, compared to last year, the results are very similar. So it shows this very high level of well-being from this contracting space. But if we look at closely and think about the COVID, actually, yes, thank you, Andrew. So actually the well-being, that's all positive, but we do need to be mindful that actually the negative impact of a COVID on people's mental health, particularly 55% indicated COVID has a negative impact on the mental health. 42% indicated COVID has a very negative impact on physical health. And the whole crisis, COVID, has still, having this negative impact on people. So this is the challenge we are facing. Although high level of job satisfaction, high level of well-being in general, but please be careful and look after yourself well. Then we move to the right-hand side of the slides. This data is actually from the recruiters and who are involved in hiring contractors. So the challenges we are facing in the contractor side is candidates worry about getting mortgage, 90%. Candidates worried about job security, yes, 83%. Candidates worried about the loss of benefits, and there's other factors. Compared to last year, we have very consistent results on those. So this year we have 2 more factors found in the results. Is a counter offer from employer. As you know that we are facing a great shortage of skills. So a lot of companies expand and they hire more people. I think there's going to be a competitive if other companies offer permanent offers. And then finding candidates with the right skills, again, is a significant challenge. Still, better than last year, but this year I think it's still, almost 50% of recruiters says that's a big challenge. Now we move it down to the end of the slides. You can see that, what do we ask for contractors? What are the influential factors to make your work better or worse? So there are 2 factors really draw our attention. One is the change in tax policy to allow better claiming of the bona fide travel expenses. So 76% of people think that that's going to have a huge impact on the work. Another key factor we found is that 63% of people think that more collaboration with other contractor freelancers going to have a positive impact on the work. Again, as we say, this is really important to do, to enable us to understand your expectation, your needs, so that we can, as researchers, we can help as much as possible. I'm sure by the end of the session, you will hear that Andrew, myself, and Trinity Business School will host in-person networking and thank you event to you. You will all be invited to come and network with others. After the challenges, we talk about opportunities. The great news is that your skills, your knowledge is demanded in the market. So we can see the employability is really high in terms of experience and find another job. And also from recruiter side, and then compared to the previous 12 months, this sector is continuously grow, and 88% think the more jobs will come out for contractors. Next, I'm going to present an aspect of the report is women in contracting. As Andrew said, the gender still underrepresented because only one quarter are female. And then in terms of pay and daily rate and annual earnings, as you can see, and with this year compared to last year, we actually see a greater pay gap between female and male. Because it's a survey, we couldn't know why, but if you have any comments, please share them in the chat box. But the good news is that even we have a 10% gender pay gap, on the daily rate, 15% gender pay gap in annual earnings, but this rate is still lower than the Irish market, which is 25%. I'm not saying this is always good. I think we still need to do something to change this. So next, I'm going to hand over back to Andrew to talk about more other aspects about the report.
Great, thanks, Na. So then just looking at the project economy. So in terms of when we were asking you about the main type of work that you were doing, in terms of whether it was involved with a project where you're very much working with a company, with employees, part of a team, part of a project, as opposed to just working on a task basis where you're providing an input on a very short-term basis. And the vast majority of people said most of their work is in the project economy. So in terms of looking at the size of the project economy in the high skills sector, that is, compared to the gig economy, we see that it's over 5.5 times larger. So again, I think this is kind of, from a researcher point of view, it's one of these most frustrating things, is that, the news and the media, and, they love a negative, a bad news story. And, so when you look at the relative importance of the project economy to the gig economy, it's quite frustrating to see how much airtime the gig economy gets, because really in terms of high skilled independent contractors, most are not involved in the gig economy. Most are working in the project economy, and and doing very well from it. And if you look at the pattern in relation to age, you can kind of see a bit of a migration too, is that there's a higher proportion of independent contractors working in the gig economy at a younger age than at the older. So as we move from a younger to older age, we start to see a higher proportion in the project economy. And I think what's going on here, and again, similarly with education, higher levels of education are associated with the project economy. And I think it fits into this picture really that the people migrate from one to the other. And I think that would make sense. If you're starting out as an independent contractor, yeah, sure, you'd like to get involved in nice long-term projects and so on, but it may be difficult initially. So initially you got to, take what you can get, and you got to start to build up your reputation, build up your social network, develop your skills. And then as that starts to snowball, then you start to get more lucrative and longer term work. And so I think that's what we're really observing here. So this isn't an industry that, anyone can just walk into. I mean, sometimes when I've been on the radio a few times and people say, oh, they're earning great income and people seem happy, I must become a freelancer. It's not that. This is an industry or a work that has barriers to entry. You have to build up experience, a reputation, and contacts, and it takes a while to do that. And that's why you have a much higher proportion of people at the older age, and that's why the older age are earning more as a result. So we see some of that reflected here too in relation to the day rates. If you look at the top panel here, we have the day rates of gig and project based, and you see the project based earning a bit more than gig. The gap has closed quite a bit from last year. And both earning far higher on a day basis than equivalent employees. So what's really important, the message to get across here, is that although the gig economy is a bad news story in the low skilled sector, in the high skilled sector, this isn't the case. Independent contractors, high skilled independent contractors working on a gig basis do very well. Their day rates are 546. And from the average earnings of those from the survey are over 100,000. So both the average earnings of the gig and project-based workers are significantly higher than the equivalent employees. And that, of course, makes sense. People in the sector are taking more risks in terms of the type of work. There's less job security, but likewise, they're engaged in the high value-added parts of business. The parts of business in terms of growth, in terms of innovation, so on, and they bring a lot of expertise, but they also get well remunerated for it. So it's a win-win situation. And then finally, just on the outlook in terms of the confidence index scores are, as I said, up on last year. And I suppose the notable difference with last year is that the gig workers were quite downbeat about the Irish economy last year. The index was -14 in terms of the outlook of the Irish economy over the next 12 months. That's changed quite significantly. Now the index has gone up to +40 for that group. And across both groups of project and independent and gig-based contractors, there's a positive outlook both for the sector and for the economy. Now there is a qualification here, because this survey took place before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So there's no doubt that has had I mean, it's a tragedy. I won't get into that, but in terms of the impact on business and the economy, it's going to have a negative effect. I don't think that it's going to have such a negative effect that these scores would go negative if we do the survey right now. But definitely they would be will taper down somewhat. So just to summarize, and of course, we've just really skated across the top of the report. There's a lot more detail in the report that you can get access to. But I think the main takeaways here is, first of all, this is a sector of the workforce that adds significant value added to the economy. And again, the project economy is in the high skills sector is over 5.5 times larger than the gig economy. So really it is time for the media and for public policy to wake up to this fact. This is a very big part of the sector, and the sector is adding a huge amount of value added. And for the most part, on average, yes, it's a tough sector to break into. It's higher risk, but those who are able to break into it and build a career for themselves are typically higher paid and enjoy their work much more than equivalent employees. There is certainly not just less discrimination in relation to age, it's the one sector where older workers actually earn more and are able to stay in the workforce longer, which is great for them, but also great for the economy as well, because we know about the burden of people retiring, and the tax revenues really being under strain to pay for pensions early on. But here's a segment that actually people are continuing to work quite long into their lives. The female part, it's better than the employee sector, but it's still a problem. There needs to be more women in this sector, and there's still a pay gap. So that's something that I'd hope to see improved, and something we ought to address. But ultimately, it's a very important segment of the workforce. And I think certainly from a researching point of view, we think that it needs more formal recognition as something that's distinct. It's not, it gets mixed in with entrepreneurs sometimes, it gets mixed in with gig economy. This is something that's quite different and quite distinct. And I think public policy needs to wake up to that, because this is something that's driving economic performance, and not just creating great employment or great jobs for the freelancers, but from research we've done elsewhere, these projects are typically a blended workforce with employees and freelance, and together they create more employment. So it's a win-win situation in that regard. It's not a case of independent contractors taking an employee's job. It's quite the opposite. They work together and they create value added for the company, which then creates long-term employment for the business and normal that's created in the next tranche. So on that note, I'll pass back to Jimmy. Thank you.
Thank you, Na and Andrew, for that rundown. Some really interesting facts coming out of this, I think. And what struck me was an improved landscape for contractors and freelancers. They're getting better pay, they're happier, they're enjoying their work more, and they seem to be upbeat about the future. And this is great, because typically contracting has worked against the economy. So when employment is strong, the use of contingent workers tends to drop off. And then when we're in recessionary times and companies are laying people off, the use of freelancers and contractors peaks. However, we're in a tight skills market, employment is solid, and yet we're still seeing an increase in the use of contractors and freelancers. Andrew, why do you think this is?
Well, there's a tension there, because when in buoyant times where business is more secure, companies will often want people on employment contracts, but that's exactly the time that independent contractors don't want to be on an employment contract, because there's plenty of work around. So that if you're an independent contractor, when there's a downturn in the economy and where it's hard to find your next contract, then that's the time you might think, gosh, maybe I prefer to be on an employment contract. But in a buoyant period where there's lots of work around and where you're getting paid a premium over and above what employees are paid, the last thing you want to be is it. So I think that's so the bargaining power, what this is demonstrating is that the bargaining power right now is on the side of the independent contractors.
Okay, so it's positive for companies. It seems to be positive for contract recruiters and the individuals doing the work as well. Folks, if you do have questions, we have a couple coming in here. The question box is just at the bottom of the screen. Now, there's an anonymous one in here that it makes reference to the hybrid and potentially less working from home in 2022. Would you expect to see a change in people's happiness or satisfaction in work next year, spending more or less time in the office?
Great question. And in terms of hybrid working, as we can see from the data, the expectation is that increase in the hybrid working. Actually, this is what has been happening in the normal in the full employment side, where companies provide employees more flexibility about working from home and offices. I think this is a great advantage for contractors, because if companies implement that policy, I think that's going to be more benefit for their employees. I think why the contractor go to clients, and maybe I'm overguessing, but it's to do the projects, But now I think you don't have the pressure to socialize with the people there. I think it's going to be good in terms of, you can still keep your contact with clients online. I think that is a really great benefit for the hybrid working. But I just want, kind of as we said at the beginning, in the data, we do have a majority, people are really good at, have very good high level well-being. But I didn't have the time to mention there are about 1/5 of the people still experiencing burnout and isolation. So I think for the group, if on the other end, I think you really need to be think about what resources you can draw on to help you to overcome the disadvantage by, blurring your boundaries between family and work, and yourself and the clients. So I think there's maybe kind of a more work need to be done, self-watching, self-checking, but also try to look out any other resources available for people to make sure that the boundary is there once people are working hybridly.
Okay, so I think that, as you're saying, at the lower end of the scale, that isolation piece might improve with the hybrid coming back in. So that's really positive. There are a few comments, questions in around the gig economy, and look, that was even people who completed the research made some comments about that. Andrew, you touched on it in your slides, and how it differs from the project economy. What would you say are the key things policymakers really need to be aware of when trying to regulate fairly for all types of contingent workers?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that the distinction between, I think they seem obsessed with this idea that the gig economy is the problem. And yet when you look at this research now over 2 years, and you look at research that in the UK, similar research in the UK, what you basically find is that it's not the nature of the contracts the problem. It's the skill that if you're worried about somebody not being paid enough or being exploited, it's not the contract that really ultimately is the problem. It's their skill level. So in other words, the low skilled that are most vulnerable in terms of pay, in terms of precariousness. And when you move to the high skilled sector, and what we've got in the survey here is we find that whether you're in the project economy or whether you're in the gig economy, you're doing better in both of those than an equivalent employee. So from a policy point of view, there's no need for intervention. So I think really the message for policymakers, I think, is twofold. First of all, is that they don't really need to intervene in this segment of the market. They just need to let high-skilled freelancers do what they want to do. It's just, this is a kind of a let companies and let workers have the freedom to work this way in the high-skilled sector, and stop coming in and trying to regulate this market out of existence. So this sector, I don't think, needs huge amounts of like public policy, financial support or anything like that. And then at the other end of the spectrum, then at the low-skilled sector, then that's where they need to intervene. And particularly around rates of pay, I think, frankly, everyone should be paid a living wage, and whether somebody's paid on a per day or per hour basis, or it's very easy to aggregate that up to figure out whether it's a living wage and so on. So I think that segment of the market, in terms of pay and so on, can be targeted, and if they target the earnings and the low skilled sector directly, then it won't impact on this sector. And the problem both here and in other countries across Europe is that a lot of policymakers take a kind of a blunt instrument, one size fits all approach, and they try to look at independent contracting across the piece, and they mix the low skilled and the high skilled in together. And the snag with that is that if you do that, you will actually regulate the high skilled sector out of existence, and therefore this work will become very difficult to do because companies won't be allowed to hire in the spaces, and it'll both eliminate a lot of the benefits we see for both the workers and indeed for the companies.
In terms of you saying there's a question in almost that touches on that in terms of how long the market for independent professionals will stay as buoyant as it is, and look, I might take that and that that's a bit of a crystal ball question, Dee, but if we look at the research results, 88% of the recruiters surveyed believe the number of contract roles on offer will increase over the next 12 months, and that it's been driven by both new projects, the expansion of existing ones, and from an individual viewpoint, contracting is attractive. It allows you to earn more money. The lack of full-time in-house skills continue to drive demand. Companies too are using contractors more. 76% of companies that took part in the survey said that the contractors and freelancers made up more than 10% of their total workforce. Now that's up slightly from 65% last year. And Andrew, you mentioned, you referred to the global element. Your research in the UK previously on the high contracting area has directly linked the use of contractors and freelancers with increased profitability and increased net employment. So how do Ireland's project economy results compare to similar research internationally?
They're very similar. Actually, this is the thing, is that I remember when we first started this research, in the UK, and we did a survey like this one in the UK, and we came out with the first set of results. A lot of people were kind of asking the question, well, is this correct? Indeed we were, but the thing that's happened really over the last 7 years is that the picture that we've just presented today is very similar to the picture in the UK, right? And indeed has been the same, say, in the UK over the last decade. The only difference really between the Irish and the British data at the moment is on the outlook, is that the Irish independent contracting sector is much more upbeat about how Ireland is going to do and about how the independent contractor sector is going to do in Ireland over the next few years. I think the UK is Brexit is really biting. There's no two ways about it, and that's why. But outside of that outlook, in terms of the profiles are almost identical. So so the difference between where we are today than we were, let's say, 7 years ago in research, is that today we're really, we're really sure of these results because they keep on repeating. So you look at the results we had in the report last year. They've moved a bit, but we're getting a constant picture. So I don't actually. Did I drift off there? What did I answer your question, Jimmy, or did I answer your question? Or sorry,
look, I think it does. It seems in summary you're saying the Irish results. Look, we're a small island with a small number of people, but nevertheless, what's coming out of the results from Ireland's project economy ties in with what's happening internationally. Look, I'm conscious of time. I might take just one or two more. One of them here is around financial companies responding to the increase of contractors in the market and providing support obtaining mortgages. Look, there's great stuff on the Contracting Plus website about contracting, getting mortgages. It's not really relevant to the survey, so I might leave that, but check out contractingplus.com for that. What percentage of the overall workforce in Ireland constitutes the project and gig economy? That's a really good question, and I think there's no results on that because the CSO don't collect that data at the moment. But I think we've mined down into that, and if you look at the people who classify themselves as self-employed from the last CSO statistics, I think there's about 320,000, something like that. And then if you mine down further into that and look at the percentages who are high skilled or who have that third level education and above, you can come up with a figure that of anywhere between maybe around 30,000 and 50,000. But there's no more accurate data than that. Andrew, would you agree with that synopsis?
Yes, we fully agree on that, because for preparing for this report, we actually went to CSO for the labor workforce and all those data. We couldn't find any particular data about contractors. And I think what we're trying here to do is actually building up that database, get attention, and then maybe in one day over this category can be listed in somewhere so we can get more accurate data.
Brilliant. And look, finally, we might just take, there's one that came into the chat here. Did the analysis show any indication of discrimination against women other than the daily rate and the annual salary? Could it be there are a number of other variables that could explain this other than discrimination? If there's no discrimination, then I don't see any logic to say we need to have more women in this market. And that comes from Colin Geraghty. Matt, do you want to take that?
Sure. I'm actually thinking about a lot on that comments. And also, I think Fiona talked about female in the workplace. If we have the gender pickup, how we close it. I don't think we really talk about discrimination about gender. We did mention about the lower representativeness of female in this market, let's say 25%, only 1/4. I think that in general, the female, representative in all, let's say, different sectors has been low, particular pharmaceutical, IT companies, so it has been low. I'm not saying this is because of a discriminating women. I think it's just the fact, low representativeness. And then the second one is about the pay rate. The pay day rate really shows the gender pay gaps there. So I think, because based on my limited experience with some contractors, because working in Trinity, we also have different suppliers on different services. And I have experience, put a bid there, get a few quotations. I can, just very limited few experience over the past few years. I can see that female provides quotes, lower than other male providers. I'm not saying that, but that's just based on my experience. So I think in general, the pay rate, maybe it's because of female self-quoted, or maybe because of company bids, I just feel there is a difference, there is a gap, and we should really dive into the reasons and details why there is a gap. I don't think that we should have more women in the market is the conclusion from this study. It's just that currently we have some issue going on around gender. And I'd love, and due to time limit, I can't comment more, but I think it, maybe I'm biased from female perspective, but just look at today we have 2 males and 1 female. So I'm saying that not mean that we have more females. I think it's just whether male or female, everyone, should have this equal opportunity and should have been paid by the work, based on the work rather than based on the gender difference.
And look, outside of that, studies have shown that businesses that have, a better mix of male and female participants around the board table actually do better in the long run. So, that science has proven that. Guys, I'm going to wrap up, but the one last one I'll just cover there is, do we know from the survey pool where these workers are based? I have some of the stats in front of me. So yes, nearly 90% of the respondents were based in the Republic of Ireland. And then 7% from either the UK and the rest of the EU, and 6% the rest of the world. So, predominantly Ireland from that point of view. Look, I said we'd have everyone out of here by 2 o'clock, so I've lied. It'll be about a minute past. I know you've logged in over your lunch break, and I don't want to keep you more than we needed to. A copy of all the results in Ireland's Project Economy 2022 will be emailed directly to you. Anyone logged in as a Trinity guest will receive their copy directly from Trinity Business School. And those that registered through the Zoom link will get an email from me later today. I'd like to thank Andrew and Na and their team for the work that went into this year's research. Also, none of this would have been possible without a Trojan input of work from my colleague Geraldine Penny, who coordinated the communication between the research team, the graphic designers, the media, and the launch itself. The quality you'll see of the report is really down to Geraldine's effort. So thank you very much, Geraldine. And let's not forget how important you, the independent professional, are to Ireland's economy, and ensuring that as a country, we have one of the most adaptable and agile workforces. At Contracting Plus, we're going to continue to highlight this fact to as many policymakers as we can. Thank you for logging in. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I hope you enjoy reading the report.